How do you know if you're ready to buy a home? Brian Tessier here. I'm going to tell you how right now. 5 ways to know if you're ready to buy a home. You ready? Number 1, do you have a stable job? I know, it seems like it's such a small thing, but yeah, you actually have to have a stable job. We're going to dive in. Number 2, have you figured out what you can afford? This is a big one. This is called pre-approval. Spoken about this many times. You can't shop for groceries if you don't know how much money you have in your pocket. We'll get into it a little bit more on that soon. Number 3, you never ever hear this. I just recently saw this and I thought, wow, that's important. Do you have an emergency fund? We'll talk. Number 4, and this is a variable. It's all over the place. How long do you plan on living there? So the key word is plan. Represented hundreds, if not thousands of buyers in the last 16, 17 years. And man, I don't know if I've ever had a buyer call me to sell their house years later in the time frame they planned on being there. But now conversely, I've heard a million times they put a ton of money into it, right? Too much, more money than it's worth. Like, we thought this is our forever home. We were never planning on leaving. People, stop thinking that. There's no such thing as a forever home. You will buy multiple homes in your life. If you're in your 40s and 50s or 60s, in the age bracket, and our parents maybe stayed in those old split entries or solid brick ranches for their whole lives. We don't do that anymore. That's old mindset. Stop it. And number 5, it's the most important. I'm going to tell you the answer is, do you have a team of real estate professionals working for you? That's right. A lot of crazy talk going on. Agents don't want to, don't pay me, don't hire an agent, you can represent yourself. That's insane. Yes, I'm biased, I'm a real estate agent. It's insane to not have a team of real estate professionals working for you. Agent, lender, appraiser, closing company, inspector, insurance person. This is a big deal buying or selling a home. Trying to do it on your own, unless you're savvy, you're an investor, you've done it many times without a license, okay, but for 92% of the population, it's insane to try this for your first time on your own, buying or selling. It's going to cost yourself a huge amount of money and maybe even some lawsuits, who knows? All right, ready? Let's get into the first one. So one thing to consider is, how stable do you feel about your employment? I have these conversations again all the times with buyers. I just had some buyers recently that I represented years and years ago, pre-kid, right? Then they have a kid or 2 and called me up and they think they want to move to a bigger home. So set them up in a search. A couple weeks went by and then it said, pause. We might be moving out of state. Okay, so we paused, called me back, fired back up, fire up the search back up, fired the search back up, and called me back and said, one of us might be losing our job. So how stable do you feel your employment is a big deal. As I said, buying a home is a big purchase. You're going to sign a document called a mortgage that gives you a loan, gives you the money. You're going to be obligated to pay that back. You usually do that with employment, right? Unless you live in Miami and mommy and daddy pay for everything. So knowing that you have a steady stream of income now and for years down the line can put your mind at ease when making such a large purchase. Okay, so building on number 2, how much can you afford? So if you have a steady stream of income, regardless of whether that's by an employer, maybe you're 1099, you're in sales, or maybe you have investment properties, a steady stream of income, it's very easy to figure out what I've talked about many times before. I call it a family budget, but it could be called a household budget. And what this basically is your spending habits. What are your debts? This should be very easy to figure out, right? Recurring payments, car payment, utility bills, cable bills, going out. This kind of comes in the family house budget. Do you go out a lot? Do you shop at Whole Foods versus a smaller chain? Do you grow your own food if maybe you live out in the suburbs a little bit more? So after you get that household budget, you want to be sure you talk to a trusted lender, which I can recommend a couple. They're going to help plug those numbers into what your closing costs would be, taxes, mortgage, and insurance. And then they're going to be able to talk to you about the pre-approval process. Pre-approval is better than pre-qualification because they're going to look at your credit, look at your debt, look at your income with you. And this is what's going to tell you what you're qualified to borrow, right? This is what I was talking about at the beginning, where you can't go shopping for groceries in a store if you don't know how much money you're going to have. They'll discuss the current market rates. The interest rates are changing all the time. What your approximate monthly payment will be until we find a home. We won't know what your exact payment will be because we don't know what the taxes on the property are. Every property has a different tax amount. So once you identify the property, we'll know what the taxes are, send it over to the lender, and they'll be able to give you a really detailed monthly payment, and how much you need to bring to closing. And all this, again, merges in with your home or family budget, and you should have a very comfortable feeling on going out and looking at homes. And I need to know what price range you're searching in, so that's how we figured out. Family home budget merged with what the lender has to tell you. Okay, number 3, do you have an emergency fund? Emergency fund is simple. I mean, it's just gonna be, do you have enough cash on hand, liquid cash, just in case you have an emergency? My mother has always taught me to save for a rainy day, they would say, right? I'm sure her parents probably told her that as well. And can't say I've ever run into a rainy day, but there's been times where the market shifted and sales weren't as abundant. I was like, oh boy, I'm glad I don't owe on that, or I'm glad I saved money here, etc. So basic emergency fund is how much cash. Actually, you don't want to be house poor. I've had buyers that are house poor as well. It means you take all your money and you put it in the house because whatever reason, you just had to have that house, want to keep up with the Joneses, whatever it may be. So as CNET says, you'll want to have a financial cushion that can cover several months of living expenses, including your mortgage payments, in case of the unforeseen circumstances, such as job loss or medical emergencies. So this is true in business too. If you start a business, especially since COVID came, a lot of businesses went out of business. There is a certain amount of months, I don't know what it is, but you should be able to stay in business without having any income coming in for 12 months, something like that. So it's very similar with a home, because your home is almost a business. And that is, can you afford to make all of your payments if you have a medical emergency and you can't work, loss of employment, everything I just said. Okay, how long do you plan on living there? So we've already mentioned closing costs. Buying a home does involve some upfront expenses. So you'll get that money back in a form of something we call equity, which is value in the home. That does take some time. This is what I was saying. So if you plan on moving too soon, it takes time to build equity, which means if you move out too soon, you may not be able to recoup that investment, right? If you move out a year later, you're not gonna have much equity except the money you put down. Because another thing your lender will talk about is when you take out a mortgage for the first X amount of years, the bulk of the mortgage payment is interest, right? That's what the mortgage company makes on us, right? You're kind of paying them their fee up front heavily in the mortgage payment. And the longer you have the mortgage, it kind of switches. The lender can talk about that in much greater detail than I'll be able to do that. As Lawrence Yun, chief economist at the National Association of Realtors, explains, 5 years is a good, comfortable mark. If the price of your home appreciates considerably, then even 3 years might be fine. That's kind of in line with what I was saying. When I first started in real estate, 2006, 7 years was kind of the mark, I guess you could say. So, I mean, what you have to do is sit down and really look at your future. Are you trying to get a job? Are you trying to get a job? Are you trying to get a promotion? Would your company possibly place you in a different state or city where you'd have to move? These are all things that might make a person move. Do you plan on having kids? A lot of kids? Does a place you're in, you're looking at buying, is it big enough to accommodate all this? A lot of buyers I represent are moving closer to the parents and also grandparents of the new kids. They can help them watch the kids while they go to work, right? Because the cost of daycare is ridiculous. I've had some grandparents move closer to the family as well, but that's something you need to think about. Are you going to have kids, more than one kid? Is this house we're going to go look at, does it accommodate that? Bunch of different factors. Okay, and the last thing is talking about hiring a professional team. That's me. I've been saying this for years, and it's true. The very first step is for us to place you with a good qualified lender that gets along with you and will find out what you are comfortable with spending. That's the very first step. Professionals like the lender and myself can really consult you and help you make an educated decision and get you plunging into the home purchasing waters. So the bottom line is, if you want to have a conversation about all the things you need to consider to determine if you're ready to buy, connect with me. I'm very easy to connect with. I can do multiple social media DMs, phone calls, text, WhatsApp. I love it if you're already in the city of Pittsburgh, the greater Pittsburgh area. I'd love to just meet up with you, have a cup of coffee. I have a booklet. I can explain the process and answer all your questions live. I can also do Zoom. So whatever you think about Brian. Why? Because you matter.